We shouldn't have to be so sensitive where a little bit of gluten throws off our whole body, or that one fast food on the road trip screws up our whole body for the next week or so. We should be able to handle that. The reason we're not handling it is the breakdown of the flora, the breakdown of the mucous system, and then the breakdown of the soldier cells. Great news is we can fix it.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. This is episode 84, and my guest is Kiran Krishnan. Kiran is a microbiologist who has been working in the field of molecular medicine and microbiology for a really long time. And for years, Kiran has done hands-on research and development at the University of Iowa. More recently, Kiran studies strains, spores, probiotics, and the like. Kiran is a popular speaker, and I'm happy to say he will be at the Wise Traditions Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota this November. Today, Kiran describes in detail how the body works, specifically what you can do to shore it up, protect it from toxins, and enhance your well-being. Before we begin our conversation, we want to thank our sponsors. Wise Traditions is supported in part by Just Thrive Probiotic and Antioxidant, the probiotic everyone's talking about. Go to thriveprobiotic.com. Hey, and connect with friends and foodies at the Wise Traditions Conference this November in Minneapolis. It's November 10th to the 13th. There's nothing like learning from and hanging out with your peers, experts, and speakers. Take your health to new heights. Go to wisetraditions.org for more information. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Kiran.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Hilda. So great to be here today.
Well, we're glad to have you back. Our last conversation was so fascinating. I was like, I've got to talk to this man again. I know our listeners felt the same way.
Yes, I hope so. And today I hope to convey an even more important message in some ways, and should be groundbreaking for many, because I can tell you, I lecture about this at medical conferences, nutritional conferences, and most doctors aren't even aware of it. So they'll probably be hearing it for the first time here.
Fantastic. Well, let's take it from where most listeners are. I feel like they have such health concerns, Kiran, that it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You were telling me a moment ago about a woman who was having the same health struggles. Can you tell us more about her story?
Yeah, and this is not an uncommon story. So she was dealing with the confirmed Hashimoto's, which we know that the prevalence rate of Hashimoto's thyroiditis is going through the roof. 50 years ago, it was probably 1 in 15 or 20 women at most. Now we're looking at 1 in 8 or 1 in 7 women, especially in their 30s and 40s, experiencing this condition. There's a numerous number of symptoms that go along with it as well. Some of the ones that are the most debilitating are things like the anxiety, depression, the brain fog, the fatigue, the body aches. All of these things are a set of known conditions associated with Hashimoto's. So she had been dealing with this for about 10 years, working through it, seeing many different functional medicine doctors, nutritionists, straight allopathic medical doctors, trying different medications, trying different dietary changes, lifestyle changes. And it seemed like the bigger the improvement she made, she also had numerous setbacks every time. And just like you said in the beginning, it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back all the time. And nobody could figure out what is the reason why she keeps having these digressions. You'd have 1 or 2 good days, and then you'd have 2 or 3 bad days. And one of the things we looked at with the new understanding that we have of how the human body works and what is actually the ground zero of most health disorders, we were able to figure out how to fix that part of her system that's broken, that is feeding this condition. So within a 2-month period of making some adjustments and fixing that part of the system that's broken, that's really the driver of these conditions, she made more progress in that 2 months than she had done the previous 5 years combined.
Wow.
It's amazing to see that.
It is. I'm so eager to hear about this because I have two friends who have Hashimoto's, and I know that they have a lot of struggles. So here it was. She was doing different things, and you said she saw some progress, but then she had some setbacks as well. But within 2 months, she was finding a new normal, right? It sounds like. So tell us more about that. What is the ground zero of most health disorders?
So what most people don't really realize is that we've got a very, very important barrier of defense against the outside world. And the fact of the matter is, the outside world that we live in today is an extremely toxic place, right? And not just the chemicals that surround us, but the foods that we consume and of the air that we breathe. All of these things are unusual to the human body. If you imagine, we've evolved over the last 3 million years or so. What we're exposed to right now is something that we've only been exposed to in the last, say, 50 years in general. So we haven't really evolved to figure out how to deal with all of this toxicity. So we have this barrier that separates us, and when I say us, I mean the inside of us, the blood system, from all of this toxicity, and that's the mucosal layer.
Oh, mucosa. That sounds like the word mucus.
Exactly, and you hit the nail on the head. It is actually a really dense, thick, wonderful layer of mucus. And most of us think of mucus as a bad thing, right? It's snot, it's gross and all that, but it's actually the biggest protective barrier in our body. So we think of our outside skin as the barrier to the outside world, but it's not. The mucose layer in the body is 150 times bigger in terms of surface area than the skin, than the outside skin. Right, so every one of your orifices, your mouth, your nose, your vaginal canals, everything is the first point of entry when something comes into your body has to go through the mucosal layer.
Wow.
Now, the mucosal layer is a very dynamic area. The top part of the mucosal layer is where most of the bacteria inside your body reside. And keep in mind that we have more bacteria inside our body than we have human cells that make up our entire body. In fact, 10 times more bacteria than we have human cells. So we've got over 100 trillion bacteria cells inside our body, and we've got about 10 trillion cells that make up the entire human body.
I love that because what you're saying is we are like a walking rainforest, right? We have all these different elements to our body that are happening beyond just the cells. It's all this microbiome you're describing.
Yeah, and that's the important thing that people really have to understand is that you have to think of yourself as a walking, talking rainforest. What we are, we're not a collection of organs like a heart, brain, lungs, all connected by vascular tissue and neurons and all that. We are, like you said, a walking, talking rainforest. We are an ecology. And the only way that this ecology remains stable and healthy is that we have proper balance, right? Just like your garden, right? If you had a beautiful garden in your backyard, imagine you have a very complex garden with 1,000 different plants in it. You know, any overgrowth of weeds in one portion of the garden, or you have a chemical spill in another side of the garden, is going to destroy that ecology. And once one part of the ecology is destroyed, that's a trickling down effect on the rest of the garden as well, right? So we have to make sure we're maintaining that balance. And this mucosal layer, you have to think of it as like the soil in the garden. It's where most of the microbes live. And then also it has key immune tissue function and immune communication in the mucosal layer as well. Now, below the mucosal layer, so imagine this thick wall of mucus, and you go below that, you go through the mucosal layer. The next layer you find, at least in the gut, is called the intestinal epithelial layer. In the brain, it's called the blood-brain barrier. In the lungs, it's the lung epithelium. So it's like this lining of tissue. That's the last barrier between the outside of the body and the inside blood. Once you get past that tissue, everything is inside the body now.
So you've got your skin, then you've got the mucosa layer, and then you have this other layer you're discussing now, right?
Yep, the other layer, let's call it the inner cellular lining, right? In the gut, we call it the intestinal epithelial lining. It's a fancy word, but it's basically a lining of cells that is the last barrier between stuff outside of the body and inside of the body.
Okay.
And that thin little barrier, and believe it or not, it's only one cell thick. being one of the most important barriers in the body, it's only one cell thick, so it's not a very big layer. And that's why that mucus layer on top of it is extremely important, because that acts as like the biggest protection for this one cell thick lining that really defends us.
Kiran, I'm imagining like a castle, right? So our body is like this castle. And so we've got, track with me for a second, we've got the moat, that's the skin, let's say. And then you've got the stone, that's the mucosa layer. And then you have one more line of defense. But I don't know my castles well enough to know what I would describe that as.
Let's call those the soldiers.
Okay, we got the soldiers.
Right? Yeah, they're all standing shoulder to shoulder, acting as the last line of defense as a barrier to things invading through. Right. So that's a great analogy. And the stone layer is actually the hardiest layer, right? If you think about it, even in a castle, once you get past the stone walls, then it's not that hard to break through the soldiers that are standing shoulder to shoulder. And that's how the body really functions. So once you break through this mucosa layer, then you end up finding a much easier time getting into the body and causing a whole bunch of inflammation. So what starts to happen is, imagine the mucus layer is a thick layer, and the top part of the mucus layer is covered with all the microbes, the good microbes in your gut or in your body, and all the bad microbes as well. That's where most of them are. Now, what the bad microbes are always trying to do is penetrate through that mucus layer and get deeper inside, closer to that soldier layer, right? That's what they're trying to do. And in fact, they will spit out enzymes to break down the mucus and make it more liquid-like, rather than being a thick, viscous mucus layer, which is more protective. And so when you have an overgrowth of things like salmonella and clostridia and prevotella in the body, because of dysbiosis, because of our lifestyles and antibiotic use and chemicals in our foods and things like that, you start causing more and more disruption and perturbation in that mucus layer. So your body has a defense. And once it starts sensing that the mucus layer starts breaking down, it starts recruiting immune cells to that area to try to protect. So imagine that you've got your special forces soldiers that are standing behind the line of soldiers that are standing shoulder to shoulder. They are your elite players. Okay. And so once the mucus layer, the stone walls start coming apart, then your body calls in these special forces that come through that soldier layer and into the mucus layer to try to help the situation, because it thinks there's an invasion coming in.
This sounds like more and more like an action movie, like 500 or something. But I'm loving it because I can understand this. And what I was going to ask you a moment ago is, does this breakdown of that mucosa layer, does this account for the fact that a lot of people have multiple health concerns at the same time? Like, it seems to me a person gets sick with one thing, and the next thing you know, they have tumors, and the next thing you know, they have arthritis. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, it seems like it's a domino effect somehow.
Absolutely. This is where it starts. That's where, this is the starting with the breakdown of the mucus layer is where it all starts. And then we could talk about how once that's broken down, what happens next, and then how that next occurrence leads to multiple conditions. And so when you look at things like Hashimoto's, depression, rheumatoid arthritis, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all of these things seem like very different diseases, right? But when you look at the latest studies, we're talking about stuff published 2015, 2016, and 2017, even by places like the American Diabetic Association. All of these conditions start with the same thing. All of them start with the same thing. Imagine that heart disease and rheumatoid arthritis start with the same thing. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes start with the same thing. So the way the disease manifests in your body will be different from individual to individual, but they all have the same origin and the breakdown of the same system.
Yeah, and you're saying this has very much to do with that mucosa layer, it sounds like.
Exactly. This is where it starts. Yep, absolutely. So following that mucosal story, what happens is once you start getting a breakdown of the mucosal layer, then your body recruits immune cells into that mucus layer to try to protect. Now, that has a negative effect as well, because anyone that understands immunology knows that the first line of defense in your immune system is the pro-inflammatory immune system, right? It's what we call innate immune system. So all of the immune cells that are being recruited now into this mucosa layer are inflammation-causing immune cells. Right. So their way of protecting the body is to cause inflammation. Now, once you have inflammation in this mucus layer, it actually disrupts those soldier cells standing shoulder to shoulder and causes them to open up. So that ability to stay shoulder to shoulder and keep a tight barrier breaks down and they start to open up. Once they start to open up, all the stuff that's outside of the body, which is in the intestinal tract or in our orifice, in our nose, coming into our ears, all these other areas, they can leak through the weak mucosa and through past those soldier cells, and now they're inside the blood. Right?
Right.
And that causes systemic immune activation. Once they get past those soldier cells, it causes the body to freak out because the last line of defense has now been penetrated. And the only thing the body can do at that point is to activate the systemic immune system and say, hey guys, we're freaking out. Something's coming in and invading. Everything is turned on. All of the inflammatory immune cascades, everything is turned on. That causes measurable immune activation.
Yeah, I've heard people say that all disease has to do with inflammation, and this is what you're talking about.
Absolutely, and that's absolutely true. Virtually all disease has to do with inflammation, but the question has always been, where does that inflammation start and where does it come from, right? We know that you could take any disease in the body and measure inflammation during the active phase of that disease, and inflammation will be through the roof. That's what we've known. The question has been, where is that inflammation coming from and how does it start? This is where it starts. And that's what's so amazing about this information is that we now have a very strong idea of where this inflammation is starting and what's driving the diseases. Right. So then imagine now that your mucus layer is broken down. So the stone on the castle is broken down. The soldier cells are weak. Some of them are fallen down. Some of them are dead. So there's big gaps in them. That's the leaky portion of it. So now everything that's coming into your body that should be prevented from entering your bloodstream is just trickling through the weak mucosal layer past the soldier cells, causing active immune response on a regular basis, on a minute-by-minute basis in your body. So you're always immune activated. That's a problem.
Coming up in the second half of the program, Kiran gets into specifics about how to build up that mucosa layer and keep your body strong and healthy. We want to pause now and thank our sponsors. Just Thrive Probiotic and Antioxidant. Most probiotic pills just pass through our bodies without achieving the desired effect. Just as you've heard Kiran say, he recommends a spore-based probiotic like Just Thrive. Just Thrive is the first 100% spore-forming probiotic that arrives alive in the intestines naturally. It supports optimal gut health, digestive health, immune health, and it delivers antioxidants. It's great for adults, kids, the whole family. The probiotic everyone's talking about. Just Thrive Probiotic and Antioxidant. Visit their website at thriveprobiotic.com. Hey, and I want to invite you personally to come on out for the Wise Traditions Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota this November. Kiran will be there, and so will I. There will be great speakers as usual, awesome food, of course. And Sally is even offering a master cooking class. You can join us even if you're on a budget. There are day, weekend, and no meal options, which will help you save money. There's also an early bird price. And if you sign up by the end of July, you'll get a free Healthy for Life book. So come on out.
Now, once the system is broken down, right, the most toxic thing that you can do on a daily basis with a broken down mucosal and epithelial system is eating food.
Whoa, that
Believe
doesn't
it or
make
not.
sense. Yeah.
Right? It's the most toxic thing you can do. You know, you could smoke a cigarette, you can drink, and all of these things, they have negative effects, but nothing as much as eating food. And this is something called metabolic endotoxemia. Metabolic endotoxemia is the number one driver of chronic diseases in the world. That's the start of virtually every chronic illness that people are suffering from. And the reason it's called metabolic endotoxemia is that it's huge amounts of toxicity that occurs from eating. That's where it comes from, right? So it's characterized by the presence of a toxin that typically is found inside the intestines. So not inside your body, but in the lumen of the intestines. The lumen is the hole of the intestines, right? That's where the food passes through and all that. This toxin is called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. It's a fancy term. We'll just call it LPS.
Okay.
When that toxin gets into the circulatory system, because of the broken down mucus layer, because of the soldier cells are now, disrupted and dead and not functioning properly, once it gets into the circulatory system, it causes chronic immune activation and chronic toxicity.
So you're saying this LPS comes through our food?
Actually, no. This is where the rubber hits the road. The LPS, believe it or not, is actually found in the cell membrane of the vast majority of bacteria that exists in our gut. So the LPS is a part of the cellular membrane of a type of bacteria called gram-negative bacteria. Mm-hmm. So every bacteria in the world can be categorized into one or two categories, gram-positive or gram-negative. What that means is not really that important, but keep in mind that gram-negative bacteria have this little compound in the cell membrane called LPS. Now, when it's in the cell membrane of a live living bacteria, it does us no harm at all.
Okay.
Right? The bacteria, in fact, use it for communication tools, as ways to talk to each other, talk to our system. It's a normal communication tool. But when that bacteria dies, that LPS gets released from its cell membrane. By itself, it acts as a really potent toxin.
Okay, so now I'm picturing Star Wars, okay? So you've got the pod that Luke Skywalker is in. The pod is, tell me if I got this right, is the cell membrane, and inside is Luke, let's just say, because LPS is neutral, right? But if the pod breaks apart, then the LPS can hurt us.
Exactly, yeah. It's the container for the bacteria. It's an integral part of the bacteria's pod, the bacteria's outer membrane structure. And as a whole bacteria, living bacteria, it does us no harm at all. It's when the bacteria dies and the cell breaks up, all the contents of the cell come out, but then the LPS that's in the structure also gets released as a compound by itself. By itself, it is extremely toxic.
Whoa.
Now, 60 to 70% of the good bacteria in your gut, we're talking about the good commensal flora in your gut, actually contain this LPS, right? So it's not. This is what's crazy about it. It's not an infection that's coming from the outside. It's not pathogenic bad bacteria that is coming in with these toxins. It's your own good flora that's coming in with the toxins.
So I think it's all clicking now. So there's something about the food we eat that is causing that cell membrane, that pod, to break apart.
Exactly. Yep. So now you're hitting the nail on the head. So there's two breakdowns to the whole system. Number one is the foods that we eat tend to cause more die-off of these bacteria, right? So, the fact of the matter is the whole digestive process tends to just be toxic for that whole environment. It's a perturbation of the environment because we release a bunch of stomach acid comes in, we have bile salts in there, we have pancreatic enzymes, all of this stuff that's going on. That stuff can hurt and kill some of the bacteria within our gut.
Hey, but that doesn't mean we're supposed to stop eating, right?
That's the biggest problem, right? So if you imagine that eating food, just the process of eating, we haven't even gotten into what you're eating, but just the process of eating is the most toxic thing we do on a daily basis. We can't stop eating, like you said, right? So we have to figure out how to protect the body through the process of eating. And that's what we are setting out to understand is what about the body is breaking down where eating becomes a toxic thing. Because clearly, if eating was killing us, then the humans as a species wouldn't exist today. Right? Because we have to fundamentally eat. And so something in the modern world is causing eating to be super toxic. And fortunately, there's a lot of studies on this stuff, and it's over the last couple of years. And so the understanding is becoming more and more wide. So here are the things that are really causing the breakdown that's leading to metabolic endotoxemia. The first one is the microbiome. So the healthy flora is actually supposed to neutralize and prevent the migration of that LPS toxin through the mucus layer. And the way it does it is a couple-fold. One is a healthy flora causes your body to secrete an antibody that actually can neutralize the LPS. So the healthy bacteria in your gut have actually evolved to learn that this eating process is toxic, And so it stimulates your immune system to release an antibody to neutralize that toxin when it's available.
The Weston A. Price Foundation is all about wise traditions, and we look to food to really help keep that gut flora healthy and all that. My question is, did the way we ate in the past, was it not as toxic as it is today? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that are in modern foods that are extremely toxic, that actually perturbs the flora, which then causes an issue where the flora cannot protect us from the release of these LPS and cannot protect us from the breakdown in the mucus layer and so on, are the preservatives in food. Preservatives act as antimicrobials. That's why they work in foods, right? They prevent foods from getting spoiled by preventing the growth of bacteria and killing bacteria. So preservatives in the food can actually destroy our microbiome. Certain types of chemicals that are used in the foods, like curing agents, high levels of salt, and even things like on vegetables and produce, the chlorine that's been used to wash it. These things, and then of course processed foods. Sugar. Sugar can be really disruptive to numerous types of bacteria within the gut. Also supports the growth of things like candida, which then can produce things like antimicrobials to kill off the bacteria in the gut. So our modern day food becomes extremely toxic. Oxidized fats. When you're consuming things like vegetable oils, like really cheap vegetable oils and deep fried foods, those oils tend to become oxidized over time very quickly. And so if you're just eating French fries from the fast food place every day, you're getting a lot of oxidized fats, and that oxidized fat are strong antimicrobials.
Wow.
So all of these things are causing the breakdown of the flora, which means that the flora cannot protect us from the release of this LPS every time we eat food.
So what we really need to do is find a way to strengthen the healthy gut bacteria so that our soldiers can stay strong and avoid the dangers of the LPS getting loose, right?
Exactly, yeah, because the way the gut bacteria protects you from this whole breakdown is a fewfold. One is, as I mentioned, they can stimulate the immune system to release an antibody that neutralizes LPS when it's released during the eating process. The second thing is the strength of that mucus layer is determined by the types of bacteria in your gut. And I'm talking about not just the mucus layer in your gut, but the mucus layer in the rest of the body as well. So the bacteria in the gut will dictate the production of mucus by cells called goblet cells in the body. These goblet cells will produce good, healthy mucus, but require activation by friendly bacteria in the gut. Typically, it's through the production of short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, right? So now your gut bacteria can neutralize the toxin themselves, but can also shore up the mucus layer. The other thing that they can do is actually recover those soldier cells that are now damaged, that are standing next to each other to protect as the last line of defense. They can actually regenerate them, get rid of the dead ones and the dying ones, and get your body to produce new ones.
Now you're giving me some hope, Kiran. I'm picturing them coming in as like medics. They've got their little medic, armband, and they're assessing the wounds and shoring up those fallen soldiers, which is awesome. I'm so glad that you're providing this hope near the end, because we're all listening to you on the edge of our seat thinking, how can we do this? How can we shore up that mucosa layer? How can we avoid the LPS, breaking free? So it sounds like you're giving us some ideas. Can you put it into plain English? How can we really apply some of these ideas to make our bodies as strong as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And none of this matters unless you have practical solutions, right? How do we change our behavior? For one, we want to start reducing the perturbations in the microbiome. And the things that really mess up the microbiome are environment, right? So we need to clean up our environment. Things like the presence of glyphosate, which I'm sure you guys have talked about a lot, the weed killers, chlorine or Clorox-based cleaners in your homes, all of these preservatives and chemicals in personal care products, what's in your deodorant, what's in your shampoo, what's in your lotion. Imagine that your body is an ecology. It's a garden. And if your body is a garden and you have these wonderful plants, would you take the lotion that you're using on your body and go squirt it on your plants? Would you take the shampoo that you're using and go squirt it in your garden? You probably know that if you put that shampoo in your soil, it's going to kill off the plants, right?
Yeah.
And if it's going to kill the plants, it's going to harm your body. So think of yourself as an ecology and be very careful what you put in and on yourself. And then from a dietary standpoint, we need to go to clean, whole foods that are not processed. Try to get as organic as you can possibly be to remove all of the chemical additives to foods because that perturbs the microbiome. Then there's some very specific things you can do to regenerate the mucus layer and that epithelial layer. For one, the spore-based probiotics we talked about before does that. We actually did a study where we showed that in 30 days, we can almost eliminate this metabolic endotoxic response just by using the probiotic alone. Wow. Where, 30 days prior to that, we gave healthy individuals a challenge meal, and we saw a 600% increase in this LPS toxin in the serum after the meal, a 600% increase. It takes the body almost 2 weeks to recover from that one meal. Right? That's how toxic it is. Then we give them the probiotic for 30 days, and then at the end of 30 days, they're having no increase in toxicity after eating food at all, just completely eliminated. So the probiotic will go a long way to doing that. And then there's a few things you can take as supplements that really do help enhance the mucus layer. For example, there are 4 amino acids, one called L-threonine, L-serine, L-proline, and L-cysteine. These are really important amino acids that are used for the production of mucus and shoring up that mucus layer that's really important. Other things that tend to help as well, like colostrum, can help that those dead and dying soldiers. And then, some other pro-immune activation that improves the production of those antibodies that basically sop up the LPS, things like omega fatty acids, glycine, glutamine, vitamin C, and zinc go a really long way in helping your immune system sop up that LPS so it's not always increasing in your body every time you eat a meal. And so what happens, what you find is that the 2 steps forward, 1 step back occurs because you're doing these therapeutic things and you're changing your lifestyle, you're changing your diet, and you're starting to see symptom improvements. And then you eat a meal and LPS goes up 300% in your system. That's your 1 step back. And your body now has to recover from that meal. As we showed in the studies, it takes up to 2 weeks to recover from a single meal. And when you have this breakdown of your system, even a healthy meal can cause this endotoxic rise because your body's just not designed anymore to protect you against the process of eating. So we need to fix that layer. Think about the mucus layer, the microbiome, and then that soldier cell layer, the epithelial layer. Once we fix that, all other therapies for conditions that you're dealing with become that much more effective, and you'll see huge changes. Wellness.
I know a doctor who says we should be able to eat McDonald's without any repercussions if we're strong enough, right?
Yep. And that's what we studied in our test. So the challenge meal that we gave the subjects in our study was a McDonald's breakfast. What we saw in the baseline test was that when we gave them a McDonald's breakfast, 18 different cytokines, these are immune markers that measure inflammation, went up through the roof right after the meal, and their LPS, that toxin in the serum, so it migrated from the intestines into the blood, went up 600%. After taking the probiotic for 30 days, they came back, we did the same exact test. That McDonald's meal registered like eating the healthiest avocado in the world. It did not have that negative effect. We're not saying you should take the stuff and go eat McDonald's every day. That's, of course, going to have a bunch of other effects. But what that's showing is that we can convert the microbiome and that mucous layer to a protective version rather than non-protective version, because we are omnivores. As a species, we evolved to be omnivores. A lion is an obligate carnivore. Lion cannot eat plants. If it eats plants, it'll get sick. Herbivores are vegetarians. They cannot eat meat. If they eat meat, they'll get sick. Humans evolved as omnivores. We eat everything, and that's how we're supposed to be. So yes, we shouldn't have to be so sensitive where a little bit of gluten throws off our whole body, or, that one fast food on the road trip screws up our whole body for the next week or so. We should be able to handle that. But the reason we're not handling it is the breakdown of the flora, the breakdown of the mucus system, and then the breakdown of the soldier cells. Great news is we can fix it.
And this makes so much sense. I love this conversation, and I'm excited because you're coming to the Wise Traditions Conference this November, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And then part of my talk will be looking at this metabolic endotoxemia and kind of showing all the data that supports that it's the number one cause of mortality and morbidity worldwide.
Wow, this is powerful stuff, and I really want people to join us there. I'm excited. We're going to be in Minneapolis. I've never been there before. We get to connect more with you. And I just want to ask you one final question, Kiran. I think you've already answered this in a way, but I always ask at the end of the program, if the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
That's a really good question. So what we did in our study with those students that we measured the LPS increase in, we didn't have them change their lifestyle. We didn't have them change their diet. As college students, they're not doing anything good for their gut mucosa layer in those 30 days. All we had them do was take the spores, and that was enough to protect the system from eating the McDonald's meal 30 days later. And so if they could only do one thing, take your spores. Those spores are designed by nature to go in and protect your system. And so if we get those in our system, we're at least benefiting our system in some major way. That's the one and only thing you can do that.
So, Kiran, when you say spores, you mean probiotic supplements, maybe like those that are found in the Just Thrive products, because they need to be a certain kind. Is that correct?
That's exactly true. And the spores themselves have to be of the right species. They have to be in the right format. And the dosing has to be correct in order for them to work in this light that we talked about. And so like in the Just Thrive, like you mentioned, that's the one formulation that we've worked with in clinical trials that seems to do the job in protecting us.
Wonderful. Well, we'll look into that. And I look forward to seeing you in November. Thanks again for this conversation.
Thank you.
My guest today was Kiran Krishnan. For highlights of today's conversation, go to the show notes for episode 84 on the westinaprice.org website. And if you can't get enough of him, you'll want to find that YouTube link that we've put there so you can listen to his talk that he gave at the Autism One conference. Hey, everybody, if you're still listening, check this out. I am coming to California this month. If you're in San Diego, come to a live podcast that I'm going to record with Kim Schutte. We're calling it Wise Traditions for Wee Ones. We're going to talk about how to feed your little children and get them started on the right track. This event will be Saturday, July 15th from 10 to 12 a.m., and we invite you just to bring Wise Traditions-friendly foods for a potluck. That's the only fee for admission. I'm also going to be in LA on July 20th. I'm going to interview Hillary Boynton at the Topanga Table. We're calling it Simple and Fearless Healthy Living. For $20, you'll get a Wise Traditions-friendly tasting menu, and you'll be part of the live podcast. For either of these events, just go to eventbrite.com. I can't wait to meet you, eat with you, and connect. Hope to see you in San Diego or LA. And a huge thanks to my friends at Podcast Village, Sarah and Georgia, and Charlie too. You offer so much help and support to me with your recording and editing chops, so thank you. Go to podcastvillage.com to learn more about their podcast services.
Did you know that there are Weston A. Price Foundation chapters all over the U.S. and around the world? Chapter leaders help you find good food in your area, and some have meetings you can attend. Go to our website, westinaprice.org, and click on Find a Local Chapter to see if there is one near you. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.